Final Fantasy. Everything you need to create both the third-person example template and the shooter game example project available from Epic Games. The Epic Games launcher and spinning some available widgets in the project. We want to do anything. So we've learned how to add a widget to the viewport, but what if we want to remove? Let's go back to our level blueprint. Defaults, receive input, player 0. Next, let's add an input for the R key. Right-click in the graph, look like this. Let's grab our widget variable and get it. Drag off from the variable pin and type in remove from parent. Press the execution pin of the R input. Now when we press the R key, the widget should be removed from the viewport. Let's compile to act as the intermediary. You can see if we add a canvas panel to the scale box, we can now add multiple images to the canvas panel and lay out the design however we wish. The scale box will then keep the desired aspect ratio size. There are several options for the scale box itself. Under stretching, you have multiple options for how it handles the scaling. Fill will not keep the aspect ratio, but rather act as an arbitrary scale for whatever is inside. Scale to fit is the default option and keeps the aspect ratio according to the smallest size of the scale box. Scale to fit X will scale according to the X direction and clip everything outside of the area. Scale to fit Y is the same but for the Y direction. Scale to fill will clip either in the X or Y direction if the scale box is not exactly the image size. You can even set a custom scale with or without clipping. Stretch direction will allow you to constrain if the children will only stretch up or down from its original size. In the child widget of the scale box, you can only manipulate the alignment. A scroll box works similar to the horizontal and vertical box, only rather than continuing the children past the edge of the widget, it clips the children widgets past the edge of the scroll box and allows you to scroll instead. There are several options that you can customize on the scroll box itself. You can set it to a horizontal or vertical orientation. You can set whether the scroll bar is visible or not. You can set the scroll bar thickness and padding. You can set several ticks for specific settings of the scroll bar, such as to always show the scroll bar, whether you want a user to be able to overscroll past the options, and whether to smoothly animate the scroll. Settings will affect how it will scroll. And you can allow a click and drag with the right mouse button to scroll the box. The child widget gives you alignment and padding options. The size of the child widget will determine the size in the scroll box. It will snap to the orientation that you are using unless you change the alignment. As you can see, as you add more images to the scroll box, you can now scroll through them. A vertical box works exactly like a horizontal box, only in the vertical direction. Just like the horizontal box, there are no additional options in the vertical box itself. In the child widget, you can customize the padding, the size, and the alignment. There are some additional functionalities that are available for most widget types. They can be found below the Appearance and Style sections. Here is where you can change things such as the tooltip text, whether the widget is enabled or not, its visibility, and its render opacity. Visibility is an important section that can be kind of cryptic. There are 5 options that you can choose from. Visible on the screen and is what is called hit testable. Hit testable just means that the cursor or mouse can interact with the button. So for instance, if it is a button, the click, hovered, unhovered, pressed, and released events will fire when the mouse interacts with it. The next option is collapsed. What this means is that the widget is not visible in the viewport, it is not hit testable, and it does not take up any space in the viewport. So for instance, if you have several buttons in a horizontal box, and you make the center button collapsed, not only will it be invisible, but it will take up no space, so the other buttons will slide over where this button was. Next is hidden. This means that the widget is not visible and not hit testable, but still takes up space in the viewport. So with our example of the horizontal box with several buttons, if we make the middle button hidden, you can see that it is no longer visible, but it still takes up space in the horizontal box. The other buttons do not slide over to fill in the gap. Now the last two are pretty much the same, but just affect either the widget itself or the widget and all of its children. Non-hit testable means that the widget is visible, but the mouse will not interact with it in any way. Now, you may be wondering why there is no option for hit testable but not visible. Well, this is actually pretty easy to set up. If we pull a button to the viewport and go to the Details panel under Appearance Style, we can set each of these images to draw as none. Now this button is hit testable but not visible on the viewport. The next section is the Render Transform. The Render Transform section works differently than the size and position slot at the top of the Details panel. Think of the top section as the absolute position and size of the widget itself, and the Render Transform as the offset for the widget when it is rendered. You can change the render position, scale, shear, angle, and pivot point. When you do, it offsets these parameters from the original button parameters. Events are also located below and are how you program what happens when you click a button, slide a slider, and any other functionality built into the widget. We will discuss this further in the Widget Blueprints section of this course. The last section that we're going to talk about is the User Created section. This is where all of the custom widgets that you've created will show up. You can actually use other widgets you've created inside of another widget. Now, why is this important? For one, you can create specific reusable widgets that you've created over and over again without rebuilding them. Then, if you need to make a change to that widget, you can just make one change to the parent widget, and it will trickle down and change all instances of this widget. Let's try it. Let's say that I want to make a custom button. I want multiple instances of this button that look relatively similar with only a minor change or two. Create a new widget in the content browser. Let's call it Button Instance. Double-click on it to open the editor. Now let's get a button and bring it into the hierarchy. Next, let's go to the Graph Editor. Grab the button from the Variables section and bring it into the graph. We want to get this button. Now pull off a wire from this node and type get. Right-click on the style output and choose Split Struct Pin. This will show us all of the available variables for the struct. We're only interested in changing one variable of the struct, which is the tent for the style normal. So to do this, we need to pull off a wire from the style normal of the struct and type set members. Choose set members and click and go to miscellaneous data table. The row structure will be a rich text style row. Let's give it a name, rich text data table example. Now double click on the data table. For every new style, you will need to add a data row. We will start by adding a default data row. Now this looks very complicated, but it's really not. It's just a set of variables that can be adjusted. Right-click on the name and rename it to default. This name will be the name that we refer to when programming the rich text block to use the various styles. Under details, we can change the font, font size, font color, and many other options. For now, we will use the Arial font with a font size of 12 and a color of black. Next, let's create a header version. Click the Add button again to create a new row. Right-click on the new row name and rename it to Header. Under Details, change the font type to Arial Bold and the font size to 20. Then change the color to black. Now that we have a rich text data table set up, we can use it in our widget. Create a new rich text block. Set the size to 500 by 250. Under Appearance, Text Style Set, choose our new data table. Now we can add our text. You may need to compile to see the results. We can see our text, but it's all one style, the default style. So how do we add our header style? There's a tag we must use to change styles for the rich text block. Click on the text again and add a tag like so. you have to put the style name within an open and closed angle bracket. This tells Unreal to start using this particular style. To tell Unreal to stop using this style, put a / in between an open and closed angle bracket. The style change starts with the name and must end with the open and closed angle bracket with a / in between. You can add as many styles as you want within a rich text block. You just need to create a new row in the data table for each style. It's important to note that styles can only consist of variations to the text itself. It will not affect things like alignment or justification. To change these, you will need to create a new rich text block. A slider, as the name suggests, is a slider that will output a value between a specifically defined range. It's just like a radial slider, only it moves left to right instead of in a circle. The value is the currently selected value of the slider and will be the number output when the value is changed. This number also affects where the handle is located. The min and max value are the largest and highest numbers that the slider can reach. As with the radial slider, the slider will automatically output the value between these two numbers based on the slider location. Orientation will allow you to change between a horizontal and a vertical slider. You can change the slider bar and handle overall color and opacity here. You can also choose whether the handle will be indented or not. Under Style, you can customize the image used for the background and handle, as well as the overall bar thickness. A text block is a simple text block that can